need a hero. I'm holding out for a hero till the end of the night. And he's gotta be strong, and he's gotta be fast, and he's gotta be fresh from the fight. I need a hero. What's up, my wizards? It's Dev from Mtg. Down there, we like it in Magic, and it looks like, based on the time of day that I'm recording this video, that it's going to come out right around the time F&M starts. And that is how you run a Magic channel. But you shouldn't be going F&M this week anyway. Stay in. It's cold enough in most parts of the country to cause severe bodily harm. So bundle up with me and the Z right here, and we'll talk about an Esper mid-range deck. You don't see those every day. Now, I say this is an Esper mid-range deck, but it's actually a Hero of Precinct One deck. No, surprising no one. You saw the title and thumbnail and clicked on the video. So you knew this was going to happen, and there are a lot of ways to sandwich Hero into a deck nowadays, lol. But I think Esper is definitely the coolest way. And I lost to Ziggy. Don't worry, he'll come back. He always comes back. But anyway, the reason I say this is the coolest Hero deck, at least in my estimation, is because a lot of other Hero Precinct 1 decks we've seen so far in this format have been pretty sweet, but at the same time kind of unimaginative, just aggro decks. You know, we play Hero on turn 2, we play Heroic Reinforcements on turn 4, and we just try to win as quickly as possible, which is nice, you know. Goldfishing quick wins is my way to play an aggro deck too, but this deck is completely different in its philosophy. We're much more mid-range in our way of thinking, and we use Hero as more of a value tool than our entire game plan. Plus, we get to play more spells in this deck than a lot of the other aggro lists that we've seen Hero in. More reactive tools and proactive tools for what it's worth. You know, again, we're not just trying to throw as many creatures on board and anthem them on turn 4 as we can. We're actually trying to play more of a thinking person's game of Magic, and I respect that. That said, one of the basic sort of game plans is still Hero on turn 2 into something gold on turn 3. So a lot of the concessions this deck has to make deal with the 3-drop slot. We play more than most decks usually play, and they kind of all have to be gold. But as a matter of fact, another edge that this deck has over some other Hero decks is that every single other card in the deck is gold. You know, a lot of these decks will play, you know, monocolored cards here and there. They just try to hit 24 as far as multicolored cards. But no, we've got like 32 multicolored cards in this deck, starting with Deputy of Detention. We'll play 3 copies of this because this is an amazing, you know, turn 3 follow-up to a Hero, considering it basically generates 3-for-1s. So you want that. And just like the actor, Johnny Depp here is actually pretty versatile. You know, it can take out any non-land permanent on the other side of the board, and there's actually a lot more than creatures that we have to worry about right now. Various enchantments, even treasure map on turn 2 is a very real consideration. So even if our opponent isn't strictly playing a creatures deck, there are still plenty of things that Deputy can snag on turn 3. But that said, there are going to be some games where your opponent hasn't played anything non-land yet that you actually can snag with the Deputy Detention. So we have to be ready for those situations. We have to have cards that we can drop on turn 3 that actually don't have to interact with our opponent in any way. So that said, we're going to play 4 copies of Thief of Sanity because this thing is bonkers, obviously. It just gives us an excuse to play Thief. If we're looking for good gold 3-drops in this color combination, we can't really do much better than this card. It is fairly removable. It's not that it dies to removal, it's that it dies to all the removal. So you have to worry about that. But if they don't have removal that can interact with this card and you get it on the play on turn 3, it is highly likely that Thief's going to get through because there's just not a whole lot of flying creatures that people are playing on turn 3 outside of the occasional Enigma Drake here and there. So if you can actually drop this and you went first, it's going to be really, really difficult for your opponent to interact with it for at least the first time it swings. And sometimes all you need is 1 proc for this thing to go off the rails. Also, one more thing about Thief before I move on here. Notice that we are presenting our opponent with a lot of high-profile targets. You know, they've got to kill Hero Precinct 1, or that's going to get out of control before they can, you know, do anything about it. But they've also kind of got to kill Deputy of Detention. They want to get their creature back. They've got to kill Thief of Sanity because they don't want it to steal cards from them when it connects for combat damage. So, and we'll keep seeing that as the deck moves on. We are presenting them with extremely, you know, must-kill targets. And they can't kill all of them unless they sweep them, you know. So, again, we're putting our opponent in a pretty serious situation where, yeah, you killed my hero, do something about Thief of Sanity. And we continue that trend with Sara the Scales. We're playing all 4 copies of this. Not only do we need premium 3-drops that we can play on turn 3 to get that advantage from Hero, but we also need to continue that as the game moves on. And Seraph is probably the best 4-drop for that in these color combinations. Sometimes you see Basilica Bellhaunt in this slot. Talk a little bit more about that later. But I think Seraph is the much, much better choice, especially given that this deck sometimes has difficulty finishing games off. And this can be a great finishing card. But even if it's not that, then it still presents this really, really difficult to deal with target in the air for your opponent that's hard for them to swing into if they don't have specifically Lyra or Rekindling Phoenix. It's not very good against those creatures, but it's good against pretty much every other creature in the entire format, and it gives us a little bit of Wrath insurance, you know? We have Hero out. We've gotten a couple of gold cards. We've gotten a couple of tokens. The worst thing that can happen is we get swept, right? So if we actually do get hit by a Deafening Clarion or something similar, then this will actually give us a little bit of insurance after that, you know? Put a couple of bodies on the battlefield and let us keep our assault up. So I like an awful lot about this card in the 4-drop slot in this deck. But we can't be done with 4-drops. We've got to play a little bit more here. Again, I want to guarantee that we get a token on turn 4 as well as turn 3 out of our Hero of Precinct One. But I also just want to play good cards, you know, so why not play Hostage Taker? You know, that's one of the benefits of most of the cards in the Esper Hero deck, is that unlike some cards like, say, Heroic Reinforcements that kind of need Hero of Precinct One to elevate them to the level of playability, none of our cards necessarily need that. You know, like Hostage Taker, Sara the Scales, these are good cards in and of themselves. Same thing with Deputy of Detention. We get to play a lot of just cards that don't need extra value, but when you pile extra value on top of them, they become nearly broken. Similar to Deputy of Detention, this can lead to 3-for-1s if you play it with a hero out, and occasionally 4-for-1s if you're actually able to play the creature that you took hostage. And it also, before I get off this card, opens up some really good sequences. Let's say we go Hero on turn 2, Deputy of Detention on turn 3, take that guy, get a token. Hostage Taker on turn 4, take that guy, get a token. So we're adding to our board state the entire time, while also detracting from our opponent's board state, and that's a really good game plan. But there's one more creature in the deck. We got to throw one copy of Lazav in here. And actually, I hadn't seen Lazav for the first couple of weeks this deck was a thing, but then the last deck that 5-0'd and got posted on the MTGO League results played 2 copies of Lazav, which actually that verified that this should go in the deck, at least a little bit to me. You know, we're looking for to play a couple more creatures if we possibly can. You know, get that creature count up. We're looking for multicolored cards. And we're looking for 2-drops outside of just Hero of Precinct One. And this checks every single one of those boxes and gives us a Surveil. Plus, in the late game, it can turn into a Hero of Precinct One for some serious shenanigans. Or it can just turn into a Sara the Scales and be a threat. There's absolutely nothing wrong with Lazav in this deck, so I'm going to play at least the 1 copy. That was 18 creatures. Half the deck is creatures, but again, exactly half of the deck is spells and non-creature stuff too. You know, again, this deck gets to play like more non-creature stuff than any other hero deck in the format, and it's an Esper, so it's got a pretty good selection of powerful stuff to play. Starting with Dovan Grand Arbiter sneaking into the deck. You know, I was a little bit surprised at first to see this in so many different hero builds, but it's definitely worth its weight. Dovan is, again, to my surprise, one of the best 3-drop options for this deck to follow up a hero. You know, if you play hero on 2, Dovan on 3, then suddenly you've got a couple of options open to you. One, you can make a 1/1 flyer, and that gives you 3 guys on the battlefield on turn 3. You got hero, the token you played from playing Dovan, and you got a token from Dovan. So you've got plenty of either attackers at that point, or if you're just trying to protect Dovan, you've got plenty of guys to do that as well. Now, conversely, you could always just drop Dovan on turn 3, get your token from hero, and then +1 Dovan swing in with hero. At that point, you can have a 5 loyalty planeswalker and the token that you made when you played it up to chump block for it to protect it. And you know, I've been messing around with Dovan a little bit in these sort of blue-white aggro decks, and I think it's a good deck just to play a bunch of blue and white 1-drops. And then try to get Dovan on turn 3 and eventually hit his ultimate a bunch of times. It actually works more than you might think, but that said, I think this deck gets a lot more mileage when you actually do hit Dovan's ultimate than just about any other deck that's trying to play Dovan right now. You know, a lot of times in these blue-white aggro decks that want to play D, you just end up with, you know, yeah, you got a better dig through time, but all you got is a bunch of 1-drops. In this deck, actually hitting Dovan's ultimate, which usually I don't spend too much time on a Planeswalker's ultimate, but it's actually relevant in this case. When you actually do get to Dovan's ultimate, you're getting cards like Deputy and Hostage Taker and Sara the Scales and more heroes and stuff. It's just, this deck gets a lot of mileage out of Dovan's ultimate, so it really uses all 3 of his abilities really well. But on to the instants and sorceries and whatnot, one of the most important cards in the entire deck is actually Thought Erasure, ladies and gentlemen. This is one of the better cards in all of Standard right now, and not too many people know it. Why? Why is this so good? This takes out Hydroid Krasis before they can even play it. You know, there's a problem with Krasis right now, and that it's just getting shoehorned into everything. It's gone up like $15 in value in the first like week and a half of the format. It's maybe the best card in all of Standard. It's a meta-defining card, and there's no real way to deal with it. Yeah, you can just kill it once it hits the battlefield. They still drew 3 or 4 cards and gained 3 or 4 life. You can counter it, but they'll still draw the cards and gain the life. So one of the best ways to deal with Krasis is just get it out of their stinking hand before they ever have the mana to play it. And Thought Erasure is great at that, but it's also great at everything else. You know, get Settle the Wreckage out of their hand, get Sweepers out of their hand so you don't have to deal with them, you know, wrecking your field full of tokens in the mid to late game. Get counter spells out of their hand, anything, literally anything that's important that you want out of their hand. You can do so proactively starting on turn 2. Or you can just go, you know, Hero on turn 2, followed up with Thought Erasure on turn 3, and that's actually fairly low risk in this format because a lot of the cards you want to get rid of, like Wilderness Reclamation, Hydroid Krasis, are stuff they won't play until starting on turn 4 anyway. So you actually have a fair amount of freedom in when you erase your opponent's thoughts in this deck. And oh yeah, you get a Surveil too, so it'll get you closer to the cards you really want to get to. So just everything about Thought Erasure is amazing in this format right now. Let's keep it a secret. Like I said earlier, in Esper, we've got our pick of insane multicolored spells. So we're also going to play 4 copies of Discovery Dispersal. These split cards are especially good in this deck, you know. Again, a mid-range deck wants options at all points on the curve, and it wants things it can do at all points in the game. So a card like this is really good, you know. On turn 2, if we don't get a hero, this will help us draw into our hero or anything else that we might need. If we already have a hero out, this is, you know, easy or free Surveil, a big Surveil too, a drawn card, and a 1/1 token, which is pretty good for just your 2 mana investment. But if you need removal, this can do that for you in the late game too. Sometimes taking out things like Carnage Tyrant for a turn at the very least, you know, or sometimes permanently if they didn't have any other cards in their hand when you actually cast Dispersal. Dispersal can just lead to wins, you know. Remember that sequence I was talking about earlier? Where you go Hero on turn 2, Deputy turn 3, Hostage Taker turn 4. Well, what better way to, you know, shore up that string than to play Dispersal on turn 5? So this card is really super flexible and gives us a whole lot of options in this deck. Plus, look at that, it's multicolored, so we get tokens off of it too. But another good split card that I like in here is Depose Deploy. This thing is actually really, really good right now. Again, both options are palatable for this deck. We get to tap down a guy sometimes and get through a Thief of Sanity. It's a really important thing you can do with this card. Tap down their flyer, get through with Thief, still one of the best cards from their top 3. So that exists. Or you can just tap down a creature you don't want to hit you in the face during their turn and draw a card for your trouble and get a token. Like, I really like that we can play this at instant speed. Because tapping down one of their guys, let's say they start their attack step, you know, go and move to attacks. Tap down that guy, he can't attack this turn. I get a token, so now you have an extra blocker they didn't account for when they started their attack step. So there's a lot of reasons that you might want to have instant speed ways of abusing Hero. This is one of the better ways of doing it. Haven't even talked about Deploy yet. This is a really important card sometimes in the late game. If you've been able to make a few tokens, get a couple of other creatures out, this thing will gain you like 6, 7 life some of the time. Get you right back in the game. Gives you a couple of extra creatures. If you have a hero out, it gives you 3 creatures when you play Deploy, you know. It plays really well with Dovan's +1, so there's a lot to like about both sides of this card. I want to reserve at least a couple of slots for this, but honestly, I kind of want to pump it up and put more in there. I'm just really not sure what to take out for it. But another one of the most important cards in the deck is Mortify. All 4 copies of this. I know some decks are going down to 3. I'm not quite ready to make that adjustment, especially seeing all the Wilderness Reclamation decks that are popping up. It's just as much of a problem as we all kind of thought it might be. You know, see Reclamation everywhere these days. And I want to Mortify to take that card out before they ever get an extra untap step with it, you know, so we can destroy it on sight with a card like Mortify. And again, you know, while we're on that subject, it helps that Mortify's instant speed. Just went over that with Depose, but same thing works with Mortify. Being able to get a creature on your opponent's turn is sometimes really beneficial to you for obvious reasons. Plus, this is a 3-drop. I said we were looking for 3 drops earlier, and Mortify definitely qualifies. You know, it's not quite Deputy of Detention, but at least it'll take a creature out forever on turn 3 and net you a token out of Hero. But let's finish off the main deck here with a couple of copies of Notion Rain. I don't think this is the most important card in the deck, and you won't see it in every Esper hero list, but I kind of think of Notion Rain the same way I feel about Thief of Sanity versus Deputy of Detention. You know, I think of Notion Rain versus Mortify. We won't always have the ability to interact with something on the other side of the table because our opponent won't always have played something. Maybe they're playing control. Maybe they missed a land drop and something's gone wrong for them. So we can't interact with them with Mortify or Deputy. So we have to have cards like Thief and Notion Rain to play even if our opponent hasn't actually played anything yet. It's important for this deck, and Notion Rain is one of the better options if you're looking for gold 3-drops in this color combination. It nets you a couple of cards. It gets you lands if that's what you need. If you need a 4th or 5th land, this will help you find those. If you're looking for, Seraph on turn 4 or Hostage Taker turn 4, just whatever you might be looking for, this will help you dig a little bit deeper and find. Coffee's ready. But let's take a look at the lands. Hate to do it to you, because if the deck was looking reasonably budget up to now, Here are the lands, you guys. We've got to play all 4 copies of all of the shock lands that we can play in this deck, which range from, $6.50 all the way up to $10. So a lot of the money here is in the mana base, but it's really, really difficult to play this deck without a fully charged mana base. So there are the shock lands. Here are the check lands. Note that we have 1 swamp in the deck. This is for various purposes, but one of the main reasons we're playing it is because Duress is the only actual 1-drop card in the entire 75, other than Spell Pierce, but we're not really looking to play Spell Pierce on turn 1. That said, after boards, we are looking to play Duress on turn 1, and Swamp just gives us another untapped black source to help do that. But here's the board, which does look a little bit different than you will see in a lot of these. But some of these lists I've seen are best of 1 decks and don't even have a sideboard. So that said, here's what I came up with. We've got a lot of the anti-control pieces you're used to. Duress is in there. I've already talked about that. Spell Pierce is in there against removal that would otherwise kill Hero or Deputy or Hostage Taker. This can be a really important card for not only countering spot removal for the lowest possible price, but also countering sweepers. That's important as well. And things like Wilderness Reclamation for just 1 mana too. Keep that play in mind when you're sideboarding. But we've also got Negate for an extra mana. This can take out things anytime at any point in the game, and that's important, so we'll do that. And Disdainful Stroke to not only kill, again, Wilderness Reclamation, but Teferi and a bunch of other 4-drop stuff. If they play Hydroid Krasis for 4 or more, we can also kill that with a Disdainful Stroke while it's on the stack. Yeah, they'll still get to draw the cards, but it's important to point out. Aside from that, this is where things get a little bit spicier. Aside from, I guess, the Deputy Detention, we've got a 4th one in there from when we're dealing with aggro decks and Cynic decks that don't have a whole lot of removal options. Deputy is very, very good against them. But the elephant in the room here is definitely Disinformation Campaign. You've probably been looking at that this whole time, going like, why isn't he talking about campaign? This is actually, I think, main deck playable. I won't stake my life on that, but there was a blue-black Disinformation Campaign deck that did really well in MTGO last season, and I actually don't think that deck is dead, especially with all the mid-range Krasis-y decks that we see in this format. It turns out that campaign is kind of better than it even was last season in some ways. This is just insane value if you follow a hero with it on turn 3. Again, hero on turn 2, campaign on turn 3. You draw, they discard, and you get a token. And if you can repeat that interaction even once in a game, it's just kind of broken. It gives you a ton of card advantage and a bunch of board presence at the very same time. You're looking to side out Deputy and Hostage Taker anyway against control, so why not side in a card that is bomb-tastic against them? I just used the word from 1996 because that's how good this card is. Now, before I get to the rankings here, there are some things I didn't play in this deck. The most glaring omissions are probably Basilica Bellhaunt, because it goes in most versions of this deck, Warrant Warden, and Teferi, which I will say most people are not including Teferi in this deck these days. When this deck first started becoming a thing, first week of Standard, you'd usually see 2 to 3 copies of Teferi in it, but not so often anymore. We don't actually want too many 5-drops. We're not a control deck. Teferi doesn't really aid us in too many ways. Yeah, it's a removal piece. It's a draw piece. Good in long games, but I don't know first that it's worth spending the $50 on a copy of Teferi, but it's not all about the budget in this deck. There are just better ways to spend our mana on turn 5. Very often, instead of playing 1 card like Teferi, we want to play 2 multicolored cards on turn 5 and really extend our board presence. So it turned out that Teferi was just an obviously good-looking card for the deck, but maybe not the best, especially to main deck at the end of the day. Aside from that, you could say the same thing about Basilica Bellhaunt. You saw this card as a fora very early in the format in a lot of builds of this deck. It's good against control, it's good against aggro, so I can see why you'd want to main deck it, but ultimately, I just think that if you're looking for 4-drops, Sara the Scales is a much better choice in the majority of matchups than a card like Bellhaunt. So I made that decision. You could go with Bellhaunt if you wanted it. But Warrant Warden is maybe the card that I'd actually look at including the most. This deck mostly plays proactively. Again, for the most part, you're not looking to hold up too much mana. So you don't really need an instant speed answer like Warren. But at the same time, it's a really good trick, you know? Sometimes you won't always play Warden. You know, a 4/4 flyer that's, you know, also vigilant, basically a Sara Angel for 5 mana. Not the best thing in the world. You will want a flyer on occasion, so you will cast the second half. But mostly, I want to cast this first half. It's another removal piece. It's very, very easy for us to cast in the deck. It's another instant speed thing to get us a token off of Hero. I want that. And it's a neat little combo with Thief of Sanity. You know, put that guy on top of your library. Next turn, swing over with Thief and steal him from you. So I think that's a cool enough combo. But I just didn't really find slots for this card in the deck. But here are your power rankings. A final score of 67, which is pretty good for a janky Esper mid-range deck, you know. But we got a lot going for us. You know, we got a fair amount in the way of synergy, mostly that we can thank Hero of Precinct One for. You know, we don't have a whole lot of other synergy in the deck aside from that, but it actually gives us a lot of synergy in one card because the entire rest of our deck is built around it, you know. We're fairly versatile. We've got some removal options. We've got a bunch of split cards that do different things. We've got a few different lines that we can start a game with, even if we don't get Hero on turn 2. That leads to a pretty versatile deck. We've got a decent defense score, even if we're not the most offensive deck in the world and it takes us a while to really mount an offense. We've still got a lot of defense in the meantime to kind of create the board state that we want, however slowly we need to have that done. We kind of don't care, you know. Again, this deck has a lot of answers, a lot of options, and a lot of good meta cards right now. Mortify does a lot in this meta. Thought Erasure does a lot in this meta. Even cards like Deputy of Detention and Hostage Taker are really very good right now. I didn't even mention with Deputy, by the way, that if you come up against an opposing tokens deck, Deputy is supercharged good, which is another reason you want to side in the 4th copy. So we've got a lot you know, going for us in this deck right now. A lot of good meta cards that would be good without Hero that are just insane if we do happen to have a Hero out, which is what I like about this deck as opposed to other Hero decks. And if you wanted to give it a shot, you know what to do. Just click the first link in the description. Go over to TCG Player. They help sponsor my content. You know, so I gotta tell you that. Full disclosure, they do give me money to say their name, but they're also, it just happens to be, the lowest price place you can get cards on the internet. My entire inbox was full of people wanting to sponsor me that charge too much for their cards. I'm not going to name names. I'm not. But the reason I chose TCG Player is because I can truthfully tell you that's where you're going to get the, you know, lowest price on this deck. So click the link in the description, go over there, buy anything you need, or just if you want to view the deck list without having to listen to me run my fat mouth for 20 minutes, that's a pretty good way of doing it too. So click the link and do the other stuff. Like, share, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications, throw $1 into the Patreon pod if you want to help decide what decks we even do around here. That would help the channel out a lot. Even $1, you have no idea. And, yeah, that's it. You can follow me on Twitter at SBMTGDev, and I'm pretty sure that I'm done with the Hero for now, you guys. I hope you enjoyed this one, and I hope you give it a shot. And let me know how you felt about it down there in the sideboard, and I will catch you cats later. I'm dead from the... Ziggy never came back. That's really sad. That's super sad. That's all right. I got myself an Igby. We got a lot of cats around here. But anyway, I'm dead from the place. Thanks for watching, my wizards. Spread love and be kind. See you later, Igby.